Hello everyone. This past week, Uranus has been stationing direct in Taurus. It's now moving forward and getting ready to enter into Gemini. In this video, I'm going to speak to the meaning of this Uranus stationing direct and what it means for Uranus to be moving straight into Gemini. Further, Uranus is also tightening in a trine with Pluto that it will remain in for the next 6 or 7 years. So there's a lot to unpack here. As always, when a planet stations, whether it's direct or retrograde, I always give it a lot of attention. When a planet stations, it's slowing down, and a lot of energy is concentrating and focusing on whatever that planetary function symbolizes as it's beginning to change direction. And there's a turning point in consciousness. So it's very helpful to tune into what is the meaning, what's turning, what's beginning to open up with this Uranus stationing direct. It's always very palpable. We can always experience this very tangibly in the collective and in our own personal soul journey. Before we jump in, I'm very excited to announce that the 2025 first year training program is now open for enrollment. This is an opportunity to dive deeply into the study of astrology from a soul evolutionary perspective from the very beginning. This is for those that are both completely new to astrology, as well as those that are already familiar with astrology, but want to start the study of astrology from a soul perspective from the ground up. This is an opportunity to be a part of a very solid and beautiful ecosystem. It includes video content, workbook, transcription, assignments, online forum, weekly live meetings for practice and Q&A, and various additional group and practice opportunities. Part 1 is the Essentials course, where we dive very deeply into all of the basics, the philosophy of evolutionary astrology, the archetypes bringing planet sign houses together. Part 2 focuses on the interpretive technique of evolutionary astrology, bringing everything together as an interpretive practice, transits, progressions, a lot of practice charts, and a lot of live volunteers as well. These teachings are rooted in the evolutionary astrology lineages taught by Jeffrey Wolf Green. And I think this is my 5th year teaching this program. And the more I teach this, the more I get to deepen and strengthen in my own inner realizations. I regard the EA teachings with an immense amount of respect. And this is just a beautiful opportunity for me that I'm grateful to continue to do every year. Now, I want to make this program as accessible to as many people as possible. Every year, there are those that need support with tuition. This is often because of situations of being a young student and you can't afford it, or an elderly on disability, or coming from a country where the economic reality is just very different than that of the US. So I have a limited scholarship options available. You can apply on the landing page. There's a link to apply for scholarship. But to make this work, I've created an avenue for those that have the means to donate to the scholarship fund. For context, about $6,000 to $7,000 in scholarship was offered to students just last year. So the more donations are made, the more scholarships I can make available. So if you have the means and are inspired to do so, your donations are deeply appreciated. It helps more people to take this work and continues to support myself and the livelihood of my own family. Lastly, as always, I'm available for individual readings. I work with individuals, couples, and long-term soul-to-soul companionship sessions. My Planet Square the Node series is ongoing. You can jump in at any point. Our next class in a couple weeks will be on the moon, squaring the nodes. I often will write articles in tandem with these video teachings. So if you want to receive these articles and recent videos and updates in your inbox, you can subscribe and check all of this out in the description below. Okay, so I'm going to actually read the most recent article that I'm soon to send out and riff on that as I delve into today's video teaching. So, as I said, this past week, Uranus has been stationing direct, and it is just hours from having actually turned at this point. Uranus corresponds to the unconditioned nature of reality, to that which is prior to or not related to the crystallized forms that we see and experience. This Uranian impulse for liberation is always pushing up against the parameters of the known, to what is conditioned and structured within and without. Uranus is about liberation, freedom. This is freedom from the forms and conditions that do not actually define us. We temporarily take on these forms, we play these roles, but it's not who we actually are. In this liberation, Uranus doesn't replace one form with another. That's the realm of Saturn. Rather, it leaves us as we innately are, as we are. This is the hard thing for many of us to understand. The essential nature of Uranus points to our essential nature, who we are, the individuality of our actual soul being, and this is different than personality. Our own individuality, our soul essence, blossoms along with the intelligent design of the universe itself. We have our own soul program innately. This program has nothing to do with our beliefs or ideas or our conditioning. There's an intelligent design that we are a part of that has its own quality of being to it. It's our own conditioning that will suppress and kind of push away the unfolding, the algorithm of this design. So a big principle with Uranus is as we allow what is to be and we free up our story and our conditioning, there's a natural unfolding that happens. Now, quite often, this will be in dissonance with our projections of what should be or what will happen, which is why Uranus will often express as high anxiety or stress. And so when Uranus stations direct, it's very common to experience that this stress and tension will often strengthen because there's something new beginning to emerge, and this can push up against that liberation impulse. And this is why Uranus will often show up as shocks and surprises. So we can liken this to an earthquake breaking up the concrete. This is a useful analogy that Jeff Green offered. Now, suddenly the earth is revealed in its raw form. In this analogy, we can say that the raw earth is the unconditioned land of our soul, whereas the concrete represents the structures and conditions that we have placed upon ourselves and life. What's most common during Uranus stationing isn't necessarily overt shocks and surprises, right? I mean, think about it. Uranus is going slowly. There's momentum building. So you can say something's beginning to move, but it's very palpable and real. There's a lot of attention on it. What's most common is more so the stress of something new wanting to push through, but not quite there yet. The world that exists, the one that we know to be available, is actually a limited and reflective state of our own consciousness. Millions of human beings on this planet each live in their own paradigm, shared by millions of others who resonate with that same paradigm. In each paradigm, there are norms, rules, expectations of the way things are and will be, all of which is a reflection of the necessary Saturn dimension of our being, which is always reaching towards normalization and integration. However, the Uranus function inevitably reveals that life is much bigger, or rather quite other, than what we have made it to be. So we can just take this moment to reflect in our own lives. Where do we feel there's this push, this blossoming opening of an intelligent design that maybe doesn't fit into our story, doesn't seem to make sense? Maybe we're resistant of it, maybe we're embracing it, but it's uncomfortable. Now, when we place this in Taurus, let's appreciate that Taurus naturally corresponds to our underlying sense of how we live. It's about how we remain secure and maintain security. And the general challenge with Taurus is sometimes how darn long it takes to embrace the necessity of change. Because within Taurus, embracing change only happens when we are absolutely certain that the change makes sense. Why would we ever want to embrace change and move into insecurity if we haven't convinced ourselves that it's reasonable or right or useful to do so? So change can be permeating and deep with Taurus, but it often takes a long time to embrace it because who wants to feel insecure? How we live, how we earn money, where our resources come from, and most importantly, what we depend upon. Our essential values and sources of security in life are all up for evolution. This can feel exciting, but I think relative to the fixed nature of Taurus, may also feel a bit scary and threatening. So the key here is to not fear the inevitable promise of change. Uranus stationing direct in Taurus in bold terms says, do not limit yourself to outdated and fixed versions of what has worked. There are more possibilities for survival and thriving that are rooted in a higher level of intelligence, one that respects the larger ecosystem within which we live and does not confine our lives to a narrow and isolated me and mine kind of reality. So we need to be willing to step outside of the narrow box of our thinking and consider, what do I have to share? What kind of collaborations or new avenues may be worth exploring? Conversely, am I holding on to a life that I just don't enjoy, but it just feels secure? It's what I know. What would it be to loosen things up a little bit and surprise myself with something new? What's helpful with Uranus stationing direct, especially where it's going, which we'll talk about, maybe we don't know what that new is or what those changes need to be, but we can rest upon the information that's provided through our feeling body. This is actually really potent right now with Venus being very active. Venus right now, it's with Neptune on the North Node. It's going to go retrograde in Aries, go back to Pisces, join with Saturn, join with the North Node, join with Neptune. Venus is undergoing a deep, deep inner transformative process. So Venus ruling Uranus in Taurus, Uranus now moving, gaining energy, opening up a new path of clarity and direction. There's really a lot of deep internal healing and clarification happening on that Taurian Venus dimension. So we pay attention to how we actually feel, not what we think we're supposed to feel, not what we think is supposed to happen, but what we actually, there's a lot of deep intelligence and information if we're simply willing to embrace it with observation, not giving it a lot of story, but letting it inform us. Okay, so with this said, let's look at the larger framework. Whenever we consider the context of a planet stationing in whatever direction, we need to understand, but where is it going, right? If you get in a car, you can say, okay, yeah, this is how the car rides. You put your foot on the gas pedal and you put shoes on. But we want to know, where is that car going? Are you going to the bank? Are you going on a long road trip that will take several weeks? So the context of this journey is really essential to understand the nature and the quality of momentum that's now growing. So what's most exciting to me about this transit is that, well, first, it's sharing an out-of-sign trine with Pluto. Right? Currently, it's sharing an out-of-sign trine with Pluto. In fact, let's just take a moment to actually share this transit. Let's take a look at where it is right now. So earlier today, it's stationed, and it's trining Pluto. I mean, this trine is 9 degrees, so you can say like this stationing is kind of like the formal beginning of this trine, you know? It was, closer than 9, maybe 8, but it was moving retrograde. Like, there's something very turn pointing about this cardinal directive movement of Uranus in Taurus stationing at 9, and it's only going to be closing in that orb with Pluto. So over the next several months, the orb is going to tighten, and Uranus will enter into Gemini in early July and actually reach a 1 degree Gemini. And in fact, let's just check this out here, progress it by days. Uranus is going to station retrograde at 1 degree Gemini, just like 13 minutes from an exact trine to Pluto. Okay, this Uranus-Pluto trine, as I said, will last for several years into 2031, 2032. So this is a significant long-term evolutionary theme that is decisively really beginning now. Like, if you're watching a television show, like the last series foreshadowed it, but now it's like in the first episode of the new series, it's like, oh, here's that character and here's that character. They're actually in this one. Like, these people are actually in this particular season. And their role in this season is only going to get more and more prominent, and they're going to return for the next several seasons, right? So it's like, maybe this is a new character, but you're going to get used to this character. It's definitely a fundamental evolutionary theme for the next several years. So with that context in mind, let's tune into what this means. The trine implies a strong evolutionary potential to heal the past, to see it objectively and evolve. It's becoming more clear-minded, more aware of how we may be living an outdated and unnecessary paradigm, and to simply make the shift. It does give a lot of attention towards a mental realm of clear seeing. And Uranus actually rules this Pluto in Aquarius, so it's a very strong Uranian energy. This happens by way of clear thought and intellectual clarity, to see things as they are, irrespective of all the ways we had previously understood it to be. Many of the solutions to the problems that we think exist become essentially obsolete when we begin to see the problem in new ways. In other words, problems and solutions are a pair. If we begin to perceive the problem on a more holistic level, old solutions simply no longer apply. And this is how we can really understand this growing trine, and then, Uranus beginning to move into Gemini. This is liberating the mind to ask questions you've never asked before, because suddenly the framework of perception itself is shifting and you're thinking in completely different ways. What keeps us from asking new questions, from questioning the framework of how we've been thinking? Well, attachments. We won't question what we're unwilling to acknowledge or accept or see. Desire yields perception fundamentally. In fact, the relationship between Pluto and Uranus is very profound, because Uranus, we can say, is a matrix of reality that we're projecting, the paradigm that reflects our level of consciousness. But fundamentally, the underlying desires of Pluto will say, do I want this world that I see? Am I seeking to fulfill certain desires and experiences that keep me locked into that paradigm? But in that willingness to evolve entirely new paradigms, and thus we'll ask questions that will yield solutions to old problems, because we're actually going to even identify and diagnose problems in completely different ways. One thing that's amazing about this trine and this movement into Gemini is Uranus is accelerating the evolutionary pace, right? Things go quicker and new paradigms begin to emerge in the collective. But there's always going to be that edge and that push, that stress for each one of us individually, where we're called to this point of liberation. And it's going to be that sense of the new is pushing up against the paradigm that is known and familiar. And we each have that edge to walk. What is it like to think differently and literally turn the radio dial? So when you turn the radio dial, you're not on a different station, you're on the station that you're on. Even if everyone else is on that station, oftentimes it's scary. We don't want to not belong, or we fear the consequences of just being so different. I think this is a deep dimension, especially relative to Uranus and Taurus. Part of what this says is we're so familiar with what we're familiar with. We're all called to embrace more openness, to get out of the familiarity and explore, where can I think differently, and perhaps maybe others aren't doing it. A lot of big social change fundamentally happens when small groups of people or individuals embrace change in their own lives, even if it's not reflected around them. So that's a very powerful thing to think about. Okay, so bringing this all together, we can understand this Uranus stationing in Taurus, tightening its trine with Pluto, heading into Gemini as the beginning of an essential and revolutionary paradigm shift. This shift wants to happen whether or not we are welcoming it in. It's no surprise then that though many of us will find the basic structures and systems of our lives, what we depend upon and how we have organized our lives in our own tidy ways, to perhaps be shaking up or just to feel stagnant right now. It's always going to be leading us towards something better, albeit as uncertain as it might seem in the moment. So I want to end this teaching with a prayerful affirmation, again, especially appropriate considering the significance of Venus right now. We each have the innate right to feel grounded and stable in our innermost being, and to know with confidence that things are getting better. The unfolding of our lives will ever continue to express and embody the brilliant intelligence of the mind of love in ways more profound than we can possibly map at this moment in time. We are designed to live in beauty, in grace, and in resonance and harmony with the music and dance of life itself. All right, everyone. As always, thank you so much for watching.